up? It's your girl, Father Longlegs. You know me, Daddy T. This is You Can Tell Me Anything, the podcast where comedians confess something they want to get off their chest. And wow, do we have an episode today? I'm very excited for my guest because we know each other way back from New York. We now live in different places, but thank you to the internet and Zoom. It's made it possible for her to be a guest today. Very funny, Irene Hartmann.
Thank you, Teresa. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. Well, first of all, how have you been doing? I feel like I lately have been taking too much advantage of Zoom recordings by literally like getting home and sitting down right at the time I'm recording. So I feel like normally I like to also catch up with my friends, but I'm like, we're about to talk for 40 minutes, so I'll just catch up with you on the air.
Yeah, no, I feel like it works. But no, I'm doing good. I'm in Denver now. I really like it out here. Except I will say, I think I heard last night there were 4 fires around Denver going, and the sky was straight up apocalyptic. Don't get me wrong, I know, Bay Area, the most hellish, night skylines that I've ever seen. But it did feel, very grim yesterday.
Oh, yeah, it does feel like the world's on fire, because it is.
Yeah.
I think it's not as bad in the Bay as it was. I know what you're talking about when it was that almost Martian looking background.
The blood red
Yeah,
sky.
the air is still pretty bad here in LA. But I'm glad that you're safe. Well, I do like to start with a good confession, just because, especially now, everything is a nightmare. So just to start on a positive note, Irene, is there anything good you'd like to confess?
A good confession. I would say, my good confession is I work a job that is very political. So, I am now officially at this point where there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Uh-huh.
And, it might be a train for all I know, but, either way, it is 17 days until the election at the time of recording. And I'm so excited to finally get into that final push, work really hard, and then see where everything falls.
To finish the game, so to say. If you've trained, you're playing, and you hope to win, but you can't wait for the game to be over.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work. I'm really proud of the work that I've been doing, and I'm so impressed with the work that the people I work with do. But it is really exciting to see that potentially we could finally come to cross the finish line and kind of take a break and get to slow down for a bit.
True. Well, I don't want to burst your bubble, but what I've been saying to people, which I'll say this, I'm not in a political job and that I have no expertise, so you don't have to listen to me. But what I've been saying to a lot of people who want to listen and don't believe me, and might be right and not believe me, is that we've all been thinking too much of the election as this finish line, when really I think we need to think of what is the day after the election look like in either scenario, win or lose or whatever, depending on what side you're on. But only because I think when it comes to whenever I've watched movies or read books about people with evil plans, not saying we're dealing with someone with an evil plan, but definitely we're not dealing with someone with a good plan. They have thought through what they would do if they won and how they'll keep trying if they don't win, which is why I think we should think, what's the day after the election look like in either scenario for visualization's sake, just because I think the opposition has visualized. That's my only one addition to that.
Fair point. Where I'm at, I mean, I'll say this. If it's a definitive victory, then, you'll know I get to sleep in on November 4th. If, NBC, ABC, CBS all call it, I get to take a day off. If there's no concise victor on election night, I will still be on that same, timeline.
Yeah.
I mean, but when we talk about, what does the day after look like, I do feel a little bit of anxiety about it.
Yes, and I think that's okay, but I think that's why I think that's a disadvantage generally on the side of truth, is that when your reality is so messed with, it's hard to imagine the future because things aren't following a logical plan. Which is why I think a lot of athletes, like, the idea of overtime exists, right? You hope that the game ends and someone wins, and, you know, nobody wants to lose, but if it's over, you play the next game. But if you're in overtime, sometimes people catch up a lot there because the person winning feels like, I already gave it my final push. Whereas the loser's like, I get another chance. That's all I mean, is the mentality of remembering that win or lose, if you're alive, life is going on, and you gotta figure out what to do next. I think having visualized it helps, because it doesn't matter. I'm not going to tell people what to visualize. Visualize whatever you think is going to happen, but just know that the opposition has visualized what happens if they beat you. So you're not standing there in shock, not sure what move the monster's going to make. Like, think about it so that you know when it happens.
Absolutely, and that's why, like, a big thing that I'm really proud of that is a part of the sort of project I'm working on is we do want to build, like, the way we see it is win or lose for Biden, we want to have, like, a cohesive group of people who are willing to hold all of our elected officials accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're very used to contacting politicians when they're of the opposite party and we need to voice our complaints, but, like, we tend to let our guard down when we're kind of like, well, this person's platform was X, Y, and Z, so, you know, I get to kind of check out now. Now they're doing the job. When they work for us, so we have to make sure that they're working in our interests. You know, any kind of activism cannot begin and end at an election booth. There has to be a strong, loud contingency willing to call out even when the people who are supposedly on our side do us dirty. So I think that that's a big thing to think about, just kind of in a personal level, as, like, after the election, what am I going to do to keep my momentum going? What am I going to do to keep from getting complacent?
In a way, like, it can apply to so many things, like relationships too. Like, if you think about, I mean, it's a cliche joke that I'm not necessarily making, but I'll just reference it. But, you know, when people talk about sort of love dying after marriage, but it's not that marriage itself kills love. It's that if you weren't being true to yourself with a goal of just getting married, and then you change who you were, like, yeah, that's false advertisement. But it's hard because sometimes people get stuck on the race, right? Like, I think in the same way with elections, like, yes, it's good to give that push, but then when you win and you have the thing, you gotta use the thing. So it's like, I guess relationships to me make sense because it's like, if your goal was to get someone to love you, so you, like, change everything about yourself to get them to love you, and then they love you, and then you're like, good, now I can be my true self. Like, well, guess what? They don't love your true self because you didn't spend the time building a relationship with your true self. And so I feel elections are similar in that, like, the finish line is actually just, you have the thing now to take, a living, breathing thing to take care of, like a marriage, or like...
Your goal cannot be a title. And I think that also applies in relationships, right? If you're just going around being like, I need a boyfriend.
Well, it's like a baby. Like, having the baby is just the beginning of having the baby. You can't be like, I had the baby, and now I'm done, back to being a person. And it's like, no. You have to raise this living, breathing baby. You put in a lot of work to push for, like, your vision of what the world is going to be. You live in this world you push for. You gotta keep pushing that rock up that hill, Sisyphus. You know, like, that's how this works.
Yeah, I mean, the struggle continues, and I think that is a phrase that...
But less of a struggle. I don't mean it to be pessimistic. I think there is positive reinforcement. So if you win things and you're being true to yourself along the way, it can feel really good, and you'll want to keep doing it. But there's no moment when you won, if that makes sense. It's the goal is to keep going. Yeah.
Well, but the thing about it is, like, it is hard to be your true self when you're voting. Because...
Well, true and not. Yes, I know what you mean, because there's so many choices that don't speak to you, but I think this is where people lose. In a true democracy, yes, it's not overnight, but you can push towards finding people who do represent you, but over time. And then I think it feels so far away. Yeah, I don't know. So I just, this is, I don't want to get too political because I know that we mentioned we wanted to talk about more personal stuff, but this does lead me into a good segue of, I like to ask about, so this was inspired by me going to therapy and just like how nice it is to be able to get things off my chest. So I like to ask every guest like what your relationship with therapy is, or like what you do to sort of self-regulate or cope with sort of like hard times. So I think this is relevant. It sounds like there's a lot going on. So how do you sort of de-stress or deal with complicated feelings?
So, the first part of that, to answer my relationship with therapy, I would describe as on again, off again. We have a very casual relationship.
Kind of like how America and democracy are, truly. We're just like fuck buddies, I feel like. There's such a tease.
We do not have their last name saved in our phone.
Yeah, there's such a tease. Sometimes you're like, we're going to fight for you. We're going to fight for your rights. Sometimes they're like, I'm going to hang out with Russia now. I'm sorry, I didn't say we were exclusive.
But yeah, I have found, like right now, I am not in therapy just because I am on not great health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like I've been in therapy for a very long time, and I sometimes think like you kind of gotta sit for a bit.
Yeah, you gotta, it's like going to a gym. The trainer gives you the tools, but you still have to go and work it out.
Yeah. So like I am in sort of a spot where I have been just trying to like do the things I was suggested to do when I was in therapy instead of like constantly adding to the list.
Sure, yeah.
And so what that kind of looks like for me these days, I would say, is I think I've just, it sounds cheesy to say, but I would say, like, I have invested more in myself in the way, like, I have developed hobbies.
That's not
so,
cheesy.
like,
That's good.
yeah, it's, you know, I play the accordion. That's something I'm super proud of. And, like, that has become this sort of hobby that right now I'm not as in practice as I usually am in, but it's generally kind of a non-negotiable part of my day. And finding these things that you largely do for yourself, with no intention of external validation, or reward. I find a lot of release in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, it's for me like having these like private moments.
Yeah, you're developing a relationship with yourself. That is curating your true self. I mean, I do kind of feel like a lot of the sort of self-actualization and growth, it sounds counterintuitive to say this, but it is about looking inward, but in a way that connects outward. Like, I know people say, like, too much navel-gazing is bad. I agree. If you're navel-gazing and not questioning your own reality, like, you need to be, like, constantly looking at what you believe against how it affects the people around you, too. It's a balance, but I do think finding those higher versions of yourself, the parts of you that you can, like, self-soothe, self-regulate with or without others, is so key to defeating sort of like false narratives from the outside. Because if you know yourself, it's like you agree with yourself, and if someone outside is trying to challenge that, you don't need a witness. You can be like, you're a liar and I see that, and both me and me see that, so that's all we need.
And it's also just like nice to set aside like chunks of a day where like you get to kill the critic in your head, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, yeah, just have fun. And the reality is everyone's bad at things when they start, and they get better. And in order to get better, you have to keep doing it. So I think it's so good to, like... The critic is also good. I think it's like you need to decide who to listen to at what point. Sometimes you gotta listen to the coach. Sometimes you gotta listen to the critic. Sometimes you gotta listen to the cheerleader. But, like, all of those voices are in your head, and there's times when you're like, okay, we're practicing now, critic. I'm not done. Go away. Go sit in the corner. And then there's times when it's like, all right, I'm about to, like, do a big thing, so critic, come on and give me final notes. All right.
Yeah.
Like,
I need the critic in my head to remind me to, like, proofread emails.
Mm-hmm.
and to like double check copy that I'm turning in. Otherwise, like I'll just like jump over to the next task. So like yeah, I understand. I need that sort of Irene. Your last email, nobody could really understand what you were saying. You want to double check that? You want to double check that? You want to make sure you got all the verbs right this time?
It's synergy. It's kind of like
Yeah.
weird that we can do it so well when we externalize it. Like even I don't do this well either because I'm very overly critical in certain times. But I'm like, we give some of the voices in our head too much power at times. We have to learn to like give them the light. I feel like that's really cheesy.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, a good show has multiple voices, just like a good person listens to the voices within them, but decides within a big picture after hearing them all which one gets to drive at that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important though to identify like who the voice really belongs to in your head, because like I'll give an example because that's something that like I can't answer yet.
Uh huh.
Like, I had a friend who I know them very well, and I know their family quite well, and they were having a bad day, and they're beating themselves up,
Mm.
and like the way that they were talking to themselves, it was like word for word what one of their kind of abusive parents would say.
Mm.
But like as an adult, this person was in their, late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
That is the critic in their head's voice.
Yes. Interesting.
Parents. So it's like it's really important to start like recognizing exactly who you're listening to
Yes.
decide how much credit you give it.
That's true. And in a weird way, we laugh at like entertainment and movies to be like kind of pop culture and junk, but over time you realize like, whoa, those voices are really strong. Like we actually listen to the images and stories we see because like when you watch movies, superheroes, like you can literally listen. You'll hear like I'll hear the voice of like Star Wars, like let the past die, kill it if you have to, which is like not
Yeah.
real, but it is because a human wrote it, right? Like we call it fiction, but it's it's like if I wrote a story, it's based on my life. Why is that fiction? So like I think we need to realize how connected all these stories are.
I mean, they are. I don't know, like the phrase that pops into my head more than I will like ever admit is from Rock of Love,
Uh huh. What is it?
bus edition, I believe. It's when Megan wants a millionaire, and one of her like awful friends, they're eating a microwavable dinner hammered, and one of them just goes, "Peas are for losers." And that's one of those things that just like ingrains in my mind. Is just like,
Interesting.
yeah, I'm like, fuck it. Sometimes you get to have the like loudest, dumbest opinion because it feels right.
Right, you're like I agree. Peas are for losers.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of opinions and telling me things, Irene, is there anything you'd like to tell me?
I think the thing I that's kind of been weighing on my chest the most lately is I'm one of the few people who like 2020 has actually been kind of good to, and I feel guilty that this is even a confession, but like things
You
have
shouldn't
gone
feel
really
guilty.
well.
That's good that it's actually working. Because it's not that you're detached from reality. You're very much in reality and working to make it better for everyone. So it's nice that you're being positively affirmed that that's going well.
It's just like it's very strange because like at one point this week, someone I work with sent out sort of a heads up that Denver was going to have stay-at-home orders
Uh
put
huh.
across the county, and so I prepared for it, and like I'm getting ready for it. I'm going to Costco. I have too much toilet paper, but like I was thinking to myself, like this little part of me was like, yeah, now I don't have to feel bad about working at home again. I love working at home.
True.
And like I felt kind of bad about that because like within the line of work that I do, like it is a huge concern that a lot of people still haven't gotten their first stimulus checks. So it's like there's this weird like guilt that I get over like things have gone quite well for me, but like I'm also advocating for people at the worst time of their lives.
True. But I think This is an interesting, okay, I think this is really interesting because what you're kind of speaking to is, in a broad sense, you're being present. Because the fact that you're recognizing, right, like the duality of it, means that you aren't detaching and you are present, which is kind of what we're arguing for everyone to be, right? Like the people up top who are claiming that everything's going well because they're only looking at a group of people doing well, they're not
Yeah.
present, but you're present enough to understand that it wouldn't make sense for you to feel so guilty that you don't take the good luck when you have it. That doesn't make sense. You should take it while you're also working to help others, which seems like the best possible version. Like we need more people fighting who are have the resources. So I think that guilt is is a part of you that recognizes how unfair it is, but also knows because you're present that you didn't cause it. So you're gonna keep going on your path. Like that's the you being in touch with the truth, I think.
Yeah, and I
Well, because like let me put it this
a lot
way.
harder here.
Let me put it this way. Would you, if things were going well and someone said, "Hey, here's a chance to continue this situation being bad for others because it's going well for you," would you say yes?
No.
Exactly. So I feel like I don't think you would say yes either. I wouldn't say yes. I feel like that is a sign that you're in the moment doing what you can, but you are not out of touch with reality. Whereas there are folks who I would say who are benefiting Jeff Bezos from
Yeah.
this pandemic in a
How
way
many
that is like,
billions?
huh?
How many billions did he get?
What? Oh, he. What did you say?
Oh,
Manipulate?
during the pandemic.
Oh,
How many
oh, oh.
extra billions did
Yeah,
he
yeah.
get?
I know. It's just like he became what a chameleonaire. Just people who are actively have actual power to make things better and actively choosing to keep things worse because they're get doing better. Like that, I would say is going too far. But that's why I think we get lost in like black and white, good or bad, like binaries. Just because you're doing well in a time when things are going poorly doesn't mean that you are a bad person. Just like there's probably times I bet when other people are doing well and you didn't feel like you were doing well. And you can still be happy for them.
Yeah.
Therefore, you.
Comedy is a great lesson in that
Mm-hmm.
one.
And that means you're present, but some people can't. And those people, I would say, are probably not doing it right, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I got very lucky this year.
Well,
In
why
a
do you say
way.
that in a luck way? I know what you're meaning, but I'm curious why it feels like happenstance. Like, do you feel like there's any part that you've changed and have become more in tune with your true self? It sounds like you're on a journey and have purpose. So I would argue that it's not luck, it's not coincidence. You actually listening to the voice in your head, and it's rewarding you.
That's a fair point, and I mean, yeah, I mean, I do think a lot has changed in how I view things and how I like experience things. Um, I think the luck for me portion of it kind of comes from like I finished my master's program this year. Um, and I'll give myself credit in that, like, I am so terrified of not having a job that I straight up started applying for jobs in November.
Uh huh.
Um, but so, like, it paid off that I landed a job when, like, a fair amount of people I know from my program are still looking or, like,
Mm-hmm.
lost offers. So, with the fact that, like, it worked out for me, I'm happy to give myself that credit of like I, you know, kept my nose to the grind for this specific concern
Mm-hmm.
a while ago, and that was the right choice. But it does, it's like I am not a better employee than my friends. I do not have like I mean, I had somewhat specific experience for the job that I have, but like largely, I do kind of chalk it up to like
Mm.
I people I care about got paralyzed by anxiety when everything hit, and they didn't just like immediately hit the ground running with job applications. So it does somewhat feel like luck that like my reaction to a global pandemic wasn't this, life reckoning, like big moment. I was just like, all right, this is another recession. I gotta get to it. No excuses. Gotta find a job.
Well, okay, I would counter that. There's part of it involves, like, I wouldn't say no, like, at all, because timing does help. But what I heard you describe was that you learn from your life experience and patterns of what things give you anxiety and how to cope with it by actually addressing them early. So even though you had thought that was a weakness, maybe, that you were so anxious about jobs that you needed to start early, you listened to the voice that said, hey, I happen to have more anxiety than others, so I'll start early. And you followed your intuition, and then it sounded like you worked really hard, studied, applied for jobs, and got a job. I would say, sure, some luck applies in that, like, even if you do all that, there's a chance you might not get it. But I would say that's like 90% you like did all the things you're supposed to do, and then luck fished that final thing in. But the reason I say that is not to be like, I need to hype you up and blow you up. It's because I think what you're describing...
I won't stop you from that, though.
Well, what you're describing is something I think gives power to people who feel powerless. And that's somewhere I've been before, too, because I felt like often, like, I'm doing everything right and I can't get it right. But if you do kind of keep listening over time, you do find those rewards in your life. And it does feel sometimes strange when things aren't going well for others. But then you remember, like, oh, there was a time when I felt like everything was going well for others and I couldn't get it. And there's a power in that you figuring it out can help others figure it out, too. That's sort of where I'm coming from, like, wanting to take back the power of calling it luck, because I think a lot of people, especially billionaires, would like sort of middle-class people to believe, like, it's impossible and the gap is so big, so you got to take what you can, instead of letting them understand the truth, which is, like, if you truly accept your higher self and also have empathy and listen to people around you and, like, stay true to those values, you will thrive eventually, and it'll actually probably help the people around you thrive too.
I certainly hope so. It does feel like a little bit of luck, though, that, like, I moved to Denver, and so far this feels like a great city.
Yeah.
I don't know what my life is going to look like post-COVID. Maybe I'll want to go back east and be closer to my nephew. That's been a really big part of this past year. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll want to stay out here, but, like, the only time I'd been to Denver was with you, Teresa, like a year ago, and we were here. You got here a day before me, so yeah. I was here for a couple shows at High Plains.
In a way, a little bit of luck, but also then I would say intuition as well, because at no point, basically I would say in the last year and a little bit more and change, I've been kind of radically listening more to that voice and just being like, this feels scary, this feels weird, but I'm going to do this thing or do this thing. And it's kind of like exponentially led to, like, better experiences and healthier relationships. I wouldn't say it's easy.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because to me, you are someone I know who, like, more than anyone else, like, you put yourself out there. Like, you try so many things, and it's so cool. Like,
oh, thank you. I try a lot of things because I think I'm constantly... I will say this. That's nice of you, but sometimes I think it's because I'm constantly failing. And for me, what I think works is, like, if I fail, as long as I have... as long as I haven't gone through, like, you know, when you're, like, swiping on Tinder, it's like, there's no more options. As long as there's still options to try, like, I'm like, all right, what's next? What's next? Give me this. What's next on the list?
Yeah.
What's plan C? What's plan D? What's plan E? I don't see that as a failure, because I'm like, if we get it on plan Z, great. Yeah. So I think that's a nice way of putting it, saying I try a lot, but I feel like to me it also means I'm failing a lot, but I don't necessarily think it's bad.
Because I kind of feel the same way, because, like, I have done and tried so many things. Like,
let's just put it this way: I would have stopped trying a new thing if the first thing worked out.
I feel like you just gotta. Something doesn't work. All right, fuck it. What's next? We gotta keep moving. Like,
Yeah.
if you sit still for too long, you get nowhere. You gotta
Yeah.
keep moving.
But I don't think that's, yeah, I'm starting to shift my perspective in a way that I think is kind of cool because I think I used to feel very cynical and now I almost feel overly optimistic, but not in a way that scares me because I haven't tuned out the cynic. Like, it's like we talked about the critics and the, cheerleader before. I have all that knowledge of the critic me and it's still there. So I'm like, thanks. I have all the info. I'm going to build on top of you now, but I'm going to look to you when I need help. So it's not blind optimism. But now I'm realizing after I learned all the bad mistakes, I also am like, oh, now I'm going to do positive reinforcement while also staying away from the mistakes. Whereas there was a time in my life I was just learning, stay away from this, stay away from this, stay away from this, but I didn't know where to go towards, if that makes sense. And now I'm finding, okay, I'm listening to this voice, like, that says, like, listen to your anxieties. It's not always bad as long as it doesn't overtake your life. If you're anxious today, could you address it today instead of letting it simmer, right? Like, will applying to 10 jobs today and then planning a night out the next night, will that make you feel better? Now you can have the best of both worlds or whatever. Like, you learning how to actually address your own needs, even if you feel different from others, can give you that sort of higher self feeling. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like it seems like you've been listening to, like, yes, moving to Denver. There's no way you could have known all this would happen. But I would argue even if this didn't happen, you would have had a happy year in Denver too. Like, you have been listening to the part of you that says do things that you want to.
I like to think so. I do try to not, like, I've been trying to avoid looking at things through hindsight these days because, I mean, I hate the cliche that it's 2020, but, like, it's true. And if you, like, get stuck in that trap, you accomplish nothing.
But I think you're looking in the present, if that makes sense. I think the hindsight is just there to give you confidence that you made it this far with your knowledge. So keep trusting yourself, stay in the present.
But it's funny because, like, you and I, we've known each other since our, like, early to mid-20s.
Yeah.
And, like, it is kind of amazing to think about, like, all the different things we've done since then, like, all the different people we've been. Like, I feel like, I think it's, maybe it is just the fact that, like, to me, the NYU motto should be, like, you know, you did everything right, but you still can't get a job.
Aww.
Like, but, I mean, that is the thing. We were in the entertainment industry when we were in our early to mid-20s doing freelance jobs. Like, from what I can tell, things have gotten a lot better for PAs and a lot better on sets. But, like, yeah, we kind of have that experience of the, like, you work so fucking hard, but, like, no matter how hard you work, the benefit doesn't seem to, like, be comparable to the sacrifice.
Well, that's what I mean about listening to yourself. So I agree with you that I feel like there was a time when I felt like I needed to put others' needs before mine, and I think that's necessary in the, like, teenage years development. Like, you need to, well, first you learn as a baby that your needs are the only ones that matter because survival, you have to, right? Because otherwise you'd be taken advantage of. Teenager, you really learn that in a way that's very annoying to everyone else. But I would argue, again, necessary. And then you go through a kind of a codependency phase in your 20s. This isn't true for everyone, but I think there's a lot of people follow this pattern where you're where then you're learning, like, oh, in order to get my needs met, I need to form relationships with people who can help me because I'm no longer a child of my parents. Therefore, I also need to meet other people's needs. And sometimes you overcompensate by giving other people too much of yourself. And then I think the 30s are a time to learn truly boundaries and how to actually give yourself what you need. At that point, you meet other people who've also learned that lesson. If you're, I guess you could say if you're lucky, but I would say if you've done the work, to then form partnerships with people who respect your boundaries, tell you what they need, and you are able to ask for what you need, but they're not your lifeline. Like, it's like having a lifeboat but knowing how to swim is how I would put it. Like, you found a really great boat and you learned how to swim. And that, I think, is a perfect version. But of course, if you couldn't swim and you had a lifeboat, could you survive? Yes. But if that lifeboat decided to abandon you, you might be fucked. So I think there are versions of relationships that work in between. Like maybe if you're a really bad swimmer and you need the lifeboat more, like, you know what I mean? But like in the best version, you have figured out how to address your own needs and you have someone to help you when you don't want to.
Yeah, but I think to that, what stuck with me that you said was about like making decisions out of fear and less out of like genuine like internally driven instinct as opposed to like avoiding pain. And I think that like, I turned 30 a month ago or so, and like when I look back to whatever bad decisions from my 20s are like bugging me that day, like the big thing is like how many choices I made at that time out of like fear and out of the like, this job laid me off after I helped them hire an unpaid intern. So now like I have to look out for that all the time. So like that really informed a lot of my job making decisions. And don't get me wrong, like, as much as easier as my life might have been if I didn't operate in the way that I did at the time, at earlier times, I should say, I still ended up in a good place, so I'm not like mad about it.
Those decisions, yeah, I would say that the unfortunate things that happened were not necessary. Like I would never say that those are the kinds of things that everyone has to go through, but you're good at being present in that since it happened, you don't need to let that take over. So I think that speaks to what you're talking about not wanting to live in the past of hindsight, of like, you still need to live in the present where these things did happen, if that's true. But then you learn how to actually take the whole picture and not let it paralyze you. Given a choice, sure, go back and make it didn't happen, but given that they did. So I think that's like, sometimes people can't wrap their head around that. Like when people talk about tragedy and being like, see, it helped. And you're like, yeah, because I moved on, because I had to, but I would not say, therefore, you should give people tragic
this
moments.
was still not my first choice.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is a thing that a lot of people don't understand, and that's why abusers do get away with stuff like that, because they can be like, oh, like, the classic, like, if you're going to use an internship as an example, classic Miranda Priestley, Devil Wears Prada, dynamic of, like, you got to pay your dues, like, I'm helping you, training you to be this better person, which is, like...
You should be so grateful that I get to be a bitch to you.
And then oftentimes what the reality is, those people, those are kind of tyrannical bosses, they know how to pick people who actually are talented and great. So the talented and great people do well, and then they like owe everything they know to this boss. When in reality, I think a good boss should be like, hey, I see a lot of potential. I can tell you what I know, but since you're great and you're adding value, you should be encouraged to grow and learn on your own and like make the same mistakes that everyone got to make. So that, I think, that's the hardest part. Like you talk about being afraid it'll happen again. I feel that way about personal things all the time.
Yeah.
But the way I've combated through it is to expose myself to new patterns. Like, get better at finding the people who have a better chance of not hurting me. Of course, there's always a chance. You're never guaranteed. But I've gotten better at looking for those people and getting out sooner and looking out for myself. And over time, you positively reinforce yourself because then you do meet better and better people and they do treat you better. And quickly it becomes really hard to go back to the old ways once you know how to swim, right? Like once you know, it's really hard to drown once you've taught yourself how to, like, not to keep using that metaphor, but truly, like, now that the red flags are way more apparent, it's much harder to wind up, 7 months into something toxic because you're like, oh, I'm out at the first sign of, like, craziness, but...
Yeah, and it's also funny, like, I was listening to the podcast to kind of get a sense of the format, so congratulations on
another listener.
Your boyfriend, from what I've heard.
Oh, thank you.
Because I mean, the last time we talked in person, neither of us were like, we were both out of kind of unfortunate situations. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much you've gone into detail, but like, and yeah, now like I've been dating a guy for like 2 months, and not only like, what I find really interesting is I don't notice toxic behaviors in this guy because he doesn't have them. But he's just a genuinely nice, cool, good person.
Yeah.
But I am way more aware of my own toxic behaviors now.
But that's also good too because someone who's healthy and able to support you can like allow room for if your goal is to grow because I think that the cycle does continue if we're not self-aware, right? Like I think people who get hurt often end up hurting people not necessarily on purpose, but let's say you've been kind of conditioned to by a toxic relationship to not tell the truth about where you're going because they always get mad even when you're totally honest or whatever. So then you may start developing a negative pattern of feeling scared to tell the truth even if you want to tell the truth. I think a healthy partner, you can say, like, you can just say that to you. You can just be like, hey, I have this pattern. So, and then you can even be like, oh, fuck, I messed up. Hey, this thing that happened yesterday, here's why. And they should be able to help you grow. And I think that is really scary and hard, but it's so rewarding when all the lights turn green and you're like, oh my God, like, this is totally not what I expected because you're acting so different. But now I'm rewriting, like, my code and I understand that I have patterns that I can fix. I don't know. It's nice.
Yeah, like I've had to keep catching myself of like, the guy that I've been seeing, our jobs put us on like exact opposite schedules.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's hard to find time to meet up. And like more than that, like we both kind of like we're busy, so text messages sometimes take a couple days to get responses. I do it too. So like I have to really make this active point of when I feel the like this sort of like clawing in your brain that's like, it's going bad now. It's going bad now, just like you thought it would.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna fuck this up, just like you thought you would. Of having to like fight through that and be like, I'm not going to like let that direct my next action.
Yeah.
I can't let like my worst, like most injured part guide me.
You can't, you don't let that drive, but you do let it in. I think it's important to not silence it because it's there. To be like, what was that? Like, give it a name, What was that, Timothy? You think that you fucked it up even though you saw no signs that you did? Why do you think that? Oh, because it's happened before and it was actually, but did it happen because you fucked it up or was that person manipulating you? Good point, Timothy. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll take that into consideration. Like, you literally are like, I understand why you feel this way, but is this similar? Like, you literally have all this information, you just have to listen. But I would argue also with a healthy partner, I mean, yes, it is more work and sometimes we want to be like, I'm not this person, I'm not needy, but like, if you are, let them know. I'll give an example in my relationship. I was feeling really anxious this week because like I have that too where things will be fine and then for whatever reason I'll be triggered and then if that day that I'm on edge I don't hear back, for whatever reason, I go, oh, well, that's over now. And I used to just be like, oh, I won't say anything because that's crazy. But now I just say it. I'm like, I feel this. And then if there is something, because sometimes, people are waiting to process it themselves before they tell you, they might act weird and they'd be like, yeah, maybe something's going on. And you're just like, you trust they'll tell you when they're ready. Or sometimes, like I've told my boyfriend on Thursday, I was like, I think I'm about to, because I was feeling anxious that for some reason he was going to abandon me. So I was like, I'm feeling anxious, so nothing, whether we hang out or not this weekend, I'm going to be sad. So I was like, should we just decide not to hang out? And then I just want to see you this weekend and I'll see you on Monday. And he's like, okay, but if it assures you, I like you and that, like, you still light my fires. And I'm like, okay, but it's just like, oh, you could just tell someone, hey, I'm having a breakdown then, you're about to abandon me. So I know it's in my head, but maybe it's not in my head, but here's what I need to do to not feel bad. I need to not see you. And they could be like, okay, or they might be like, hey, I feel like that's unfair. But even them talking to you would make you feel better because they're acknowledging this feeling is real and not, I think it's that they're not causing it, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist,
Yeah, because you sometimes, or at least I've gotten sort of like sucked into that cycle of like, if I say something else, I'm gonna look crazy, but I already look crazy, so I need to say something so I don't look crazy. I need to clarify that I'm not crazy.
But I would say it only seems crazy if they don't know how you think, right? But if you actually
Yeah.
walk them through everything, like if I told, look, if you told me, if you were acting strange, let's not say crazy,
Mhm.
let's say if we made a plan to hang out on Friday and then on Thursday I text you, hey, so where do you want to meet? I didn't hear back. And then Friday morning I started feeling like anxious because I'm like, are we, are we not hanging out? But
Yeah.
you, let's say you're the kind of person who makes plans and always follows through, and so you may not have responded, but you're like, we have a plan Friday night. I'll text you later. But I might have an experience where plenty of times people have just blown me off or decided last minute and acted weird. So now I'm feeling like, oh, here we go again. So it's not crazy. None of us are crazy. But if I say nothing, because I'm aware that I'm the one with the pattern, then what might end up happening is I start acting weird, and then you're like, she's acting weird. And then I start being cold, and you're like, she's acting cold. And maybe you don't want to hang out with me because I'm mad and cold. And then I manifest that it's a weird hang. But I could also say, hey, I feel very anxious about our hanging out Friday night. Even though we made a plan, I have a lot of experience with people blowing me off, and somehow I my brain feels like because we haven't set a time and date and place, and because I'm so looking forward to it, that I'm already starting to try to distance myself by telling myself I don't want to hang out with you, or I need to have a plan. And so now that I'm here, I can't stop it. So if you are feeling like you're not sure, will you let me know now or not? Like that, I don't think it's crazy because you've just explained exactly what you feel, and they might be like, "Oh, that's different," but it's not crazy. It's different from how I feel, but it's not crazy.
Yeah, I think like I mean something else I've been doing, um, like when I want to reach out to people, be they like friends, lovers, former lovers, whatever, is I try to like take a second to just like stop and identify what I want out of them in that
Mm.
moment. And
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, am I just looking to like vent about something? In which case, like, how am I phrasing this? Am I phrasing it in a like attention seeking manner?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I phrasing this as a like, bad day, can I call you for 15 minutes? Like, am
That's
I giving
nice.
this person a
Yeah.
fair chance to respond to what I actually need?
Uh huh.
Or like, I mean, I'm kind of a pissant. Like sometimes like I feel that impulse of like I'm gonna make trouble for no reason. So of
Well,
having to be like, oh, that's happening right now.
that's a
Can't do
very, very
nothing.
mature thing to say because you like. I like that you call it a fair chance because that you recognize that there is some responsibility in yourself of giving you what you need. Although you can bring in help, right? It's like I call it like contracting. I can contract out contractors to help me, but ultimately I am the boss. So like if I it's like if I called you in for an interview and then I was like, you know what the job is. You tell me. And you're like, I didn't see a
Yeah,
job description. What do you want me to do? You figure it out. Or you're not hired. And you're like, or I should be like, hey, I'm looking for someone to do this, this, and this. Let me know if you can do it. And then you can decide. So I think it's hard because it implies actually giving yourself autonomy, which the flip side is difficult for people who've been in toxic situations because that's taken away from you in a way where you almost feel like it's easier to surrender it. Like if you believe you never had autonomy, you won't feel as guilty for ending up in toxic situations. Um, but once you have it, you can go, okay, I'm looking for someone to tell me everything's gonna be okay because I'm sad. Then you can say, hey, I'm feeling like you said, I'm feeling sad. I kind of need this. Can I tell you this? As a friend who wants you to feel better but doesn't know how, I'd be like, oh, thank God they told me how to make them feel better. Now I don't have to guess. I can just be a friend. So it's like,
yeah. And that's something that takes a lot of work, especially if you're from like a background where maybe like passive aggression is a more common response than just direct like X happened, you can do Y about it.
yeah.
Um, so it's like you kind of, and it's something I've been really trying to like focus on, especially like as my job has gotten more stressful, of like not not starting by letting myself like get apocalyptic in my head about things, And like when I start to feel that like pull of like the dread and that like the larger than you feeling of anxiety of like getting into like good group chat and being like, I'm having a bad day at work, X, Y, and Z happened, I'm so frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Of just like trying to be direct about it, because then like people actually give you what you need.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think people react to when they don't know what you want or need from them. They sometimes get defensive, right? Because they might be like,
Yeah.
"What?" Like for like they like an example in relationships. If someone thinks that you're actually trying to make things more serious, but you're not, and then they start pulling away, it's a reaction because they don't trust. They're not used to people saying what they really need and meaning it. But if you're around people who say what they mean and need, and then you can also say, "Hey, I need this," and they can say no, and you can also say, "Okay, I respect your no," and then
Yeah.
you go, "That sucks because I wanted it, but I also it's not your job. Like I'm the CEO, and you said no to a job. Cool. Like you can be sad, but it's not devastating." And I think in order to get there, you have to understand that people are allowed to not give you what you need.
Yeah.
But you'll have a much better chance if you ask for it, and then you'll like be able to, like you said, try the next thing, right?
Yeah, and that's something like I feel like it almost like disempowers that the like catastrophic apocalyptic like feelings if you start thinking through these interactions of like what do I want from this person? What do I want from the situation? And what how will I feel if I don't get it?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like if what I want doesn't actually mean that much, but not getting it means so much more, then there's something bigger than whatever this is going on that needs to be actually like
Mm-hmm.
pieced out.
Yeah, there's wounds that go deep, right? Like it's like I
Yeah.
might want to hang out with someone on a certain night, but then when they say no, I'm like having a breakdown and thinking nobody will ever love me. Well, I don't think I was looking for Friday night plans. I think I was looking for security and a feeling of safety that goes very deep, that has nothing to
Yeah.
do with what I'm doing Friday. You know what I mean? Like it's like, yeah, sure, it could be like, oh man, I thought we were gonna hang out, but that's like, all right, well, I'll do something else. And then there's, I have a deep wound of people abandoning me, and you saying no implies that you're about to, like, it's like, you gotta separate
Yeah.
that, but you also should be able to allow it, because by allowing that voice, then you can understand it, and eventually you'll be like, okay, so maybe that was built on bad experiences, so I'm going to load myself up with good experiences, and eventually maybe that voice will get a little quieter. But it's always there as a little alarm bell, right? So that you don't wind
Yeah.
up there again. Like, you don't want to erase that voice. You just want it to be a little more chill, take a nap, and then, like, come back when
Yeah.
you really
You
feel like
kind
it.
of got to treat it like a car alarm. Like you should still look out your window when you hear one going off to make sure it's not your car.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You should not, your your goals should not be to ignore alarms or be deaf to them. The goal should be to get better at hearing the different alarms and tune the alarm. Like you tune yourself and you tune the alarm. So you're both
Yeah.
like working in synchronicity.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
Thanks. I love metaphors. Well, we've run to the end of the pod, but I'm really happy to hear that things are going well and in a way that I think is empowering, not randomly. Like I think that it's not. There is luck, of course, but I think that's you've been allowing that voice and the true self to foster, and that's good. But I want to end with a quick little game. This is something I've been doing on some of the more recent ones. It's just I call it 3 rules. So it's if you get to create your own society, like Ireneville or whatever, and like you get I give you an island, you can start it. Everyone has to follow 3 rules. It doesn't have to be necessarily political, but they have to be realistic. So no magic. Anything that could actually be regulated. Like you could say, if you wanted, everyone has to wear hats, but like it would have to be within the world of physics, I guess, if that
Now,
makes
can we
sense.
define it as like more of a social norm than something regulated?
It can be either. You could be, you start off as like you're creating a world, you don't have to be the dictator, but you could be. Like, you could, part of the rule could be nobody is in charge, but like, you are the one creating the infrastructure. What are the 3 rules?
Okay, first one is a social guideline. If you're on stairs or an escalator, there's one side for standing and one side for walking.
Okay, I like it.
Anything else is just chaos.
I like it. It's simple, but it's like the simple things feed into the rest of the society. If everyone can do one simple thing, then we all can respect each other.
So much easier. Like, I am German. I go back to Germany not infrequently. Or rather, my father is from Germany. I was born in America. People, there's one side of the staircase for standing or walking slowly and one for fast. It is so much easier than the subway. Like, nobody's fucking throwing elbows to get through a turnstile.
I like that.
Second of all, mass transportation for all. Free.
Okay.
Everything is connected. People can get around easily. You can live in one side of the city and work in the other, and it doesn't make your life miserable.
That's nice. So, okay. So public transportation provided by the government for all.
Yeah. Going back between either everyone has to be nice to cats or no billionaires, because they both feel really important.
Interesting. It's funny. Last time we talked about billionaires, I used cats as an example. So.
Oh, please elaborate.
I think I've already said it on
one of my rules.
I've already said it on this pod, but I was just saying the idea of billionaires is created because, well, the long story short is like people I don't think that billionaires need to necessarily not exist, but they can exist when there's people who don't have enough. Just like I think some people have a lot of cats and nobody cares that a lot of people have a lot of cats because we don't all want cats. If that makes sense? Okay. So that's the metaphor of like, I don't think inherently having a lot implies other people don't, but I don't think it's ethical to have a lot when other, just like I don't think I care if, I mean, yes, to a hygiene standpoint, I think you should be able to take care of all your cats, but if you have 10 cats and they're doing great, I'm not going to be mad that you exist and I have no cats because I don't want cats.
I mean, anybody with 10 cats, if they're not barn cats, they are not happy.
But I feel like that's the root of hating billionaires, because I hate them too, but the root is that they turn their back on people not having enough. So inherently, I think if we all had a chance to be billionaires, it'd be okay. I do like the idea of excessive wealth if we all had a chance to do it. So I guess my point is, I think it's fun as long as we all have it.
But what's funny is, like, I saw your thing the other day on Twitter. I think you've posted it before. Nothing should be more than $200.
Oh yeah, I accidentally deleted it and then I reposted.
About that. Toilet paper in my neighborhood is $2.25. I was walking around just thinking, toilet paper, $1. Should be $1.
Well, things should not be more because at a certain point we're just recycling. Price becomes meaningless. But this is a totally different podcast. Okay,
if I say no one has over $100 million.
No one has over 100. Well, I like your toilet paper can't be over $1 rule. That's good too.
You're right. Because
the simple things.
Bullshit. I was so mad.
If there's one thing that always costs one, you know what I mean? Like, it's just stability.
Yeah. Soda should always be $1. Toilet paper should always be $1. Gumballs always 25 cents.
And the stability. What you're kind of describing is interesting because, like, yes, we subsidize farming foods, but it's such a big industry. What if you had a society, like, not a communist society, but, like, I don't know. I probably would need a new name. It's closer to socialism, but it's not. It's kind of like capitalist socialism. I bet I could sell socialism if I called it capitalist socialism. Let me tell you, I could sell CSA, Capitalist Socialists of America. I would be able to get all of the liberal Silicon Valley people on board. But the thing is, a
lot of them would join because it does also sound like a farming co-op.
And also kind of like an accounting firm. But if you, and an agency too. But if you, this is a capitalist socialist rule you just inspired. Certain essential goods are regulated, but they're across industries. And I say so like, you know how we tax cigarettes because they're bad for us, but they're technically regulated. Certain essential goods, like toilet paper, whatever, certain things cost this much. And you can go to, and I'm not talking about food stamps as handouts. Even though there's nothing wrong with food stamps, I just think in the zeitgeist, it has a bad rep as it hasn't been branded in a way that feels like it's for everyone, because billionaires love to use stupid words like the welfare state, even though they take handouts. So in this version, it would be cross class. It's just kind of a cool thing, just like the sun is free when we go outside.
Yeah.
Which certain
Well, you're eliminating means testing, because we say certain things we all have a right to. We all have a right to have a home. We have a right to not die of cancer.
But this is capitalist because it would be regulated with money, but it just wouldn't be hiked up. So it'd be like, let's say like toilet paper is $1. Your coffee is this much. Blah blah blah. The things that always kind of the things that keep the economy going, because pretty much guaranteed people are buying, are subsidized in a way that they're regulated. Therefore, the luxury goods around it get to have the capitalist luxury tax. Like, oh, if I want to make fancy scented toilet paper for the rich people who have the money to splurge, go for it. But at the very end of the day, we all have these basics. That gives you little tiered ways to be capitalist without totally monopolizing an entire industry. Like, let's say the internet at a very basic level is moderated so everyone has access. But then you got these fancy gaming high-speed internets and fancy streaming Twitch. Or you want to watch 10 movies a day? You can watch one, but if you want to watch 10, you got to pay extra. I think then we have something here. We have capitalist stratified industries where there's a base for everyone.
It sounds a lot like East Germany, I'm not going to lie, because that was very similar to the East German model under
But that was when they didn't have enough, right? But I'm talking about, what if we all start from a place where everyone has enough? Because if you're doing it to ration, it's one thing. But if you're doing it the way we, subsidize corn or whatever,
But we also would then have to take a radical approach to how we allocate money.
Here's how we would bet on it. Wall Street can still win. You're not betting on the price. You're betting on the difference from the regulated price to the next tier. So Wall Street's still going because they need a bet on commodities. Well, they bet on the difference, which people are doing anyways. They bet on volatility. We've already figured out a way to do this, just that they haven't told us that they're on a different system yet.
But what stands out to me is that within a system like that, there need to be controls in place through the form of high taxes that actually subsidize human needs.
No. Here's what I think. For example, Silicon Valley. Okay, I won't get too into it, but I'll say this. I thought this through, and it's like housing too. All the people at the top taken away from the thing, if I'm making a margin of $10 on toilet paper because I made fancy toilet paper, I would be taxed for the excess, but I wouldn't mind because I'm selling to billionaires and making a huge excess. So within your industry, the people who are making a lot from the top would be required to have certain, it's kind of like, if you build a high-rise luxury building and you reserve at least one floor that's subsidized, it actually integrates people who have from different classes into the same community, therefore making them not feel like different classes. Which is better than if you put people in projects by themselves, because then they are only interacting with each other and they're not growing. So if you're selling toilet paper, but you have 3 tiers of toilet paper and you're the CEO and you have budgeted that this one costs $1, but I have all these extra things that people are buying, I don't think I'd be so against people buying the bottom tier because that's stable income, while I find ways to marginally increase my income up top to people who want it.
Again, what I think really does need to happen, though, is whenever we sort of do these things of saying, here is our lowest standard, and you can do whatever you want to build on top of that within this range, historically, through political influence, through greed, that whatever your lowest standard is will get pushed lower, and it will get made more expensive.
Well, that's why I don't think it should be low standard.
Capitalism is the lowest cost and the highest price margin.
That's capitalism. So I'm talking about capitalist socialism, which is not real, but I made up, which I think would work. Because I never said lowest. Okay, you can go lower than the lowest, and you would. Someone would be like, I can make more money going lower. But there is a price that you guarantee always can get this thing at. And you can go lower if you want. If you don't understand economics, that's on you.
But I guess it's like, have you had to do an economy budget flight or an economy basic flight?
Yeah, but I'm talking, they do this already for they do this already, but for commodities, I'm just saying, if we
I'm just
selectively
thinking
chose
about like it
certain,
used to cost $100 to fly from Brooklyn, from New York to Rochester, and then the price keeps creeping up, and all of a sudden it's $150, but that's economy basic, which is the exact same price I was paying, but now I get less for it.
yes.
And that's always my concern when we allow.
But that's because we're in a capitalist society in an oligarchy. Well, anyways, we'll continue this another day. I think that we're saying similar things, but we haven't mapped out the
We
model.
want the same outcome.
I don't think that what I'm saying is, I don't think where we live in truly is capitalist right now, because capitalism is supposed to give you the best possible product for the lowest possible price. But what we're actually doing is cutting corners on the best possible product by limiting information to consumers about which is the best possible product, think Amazon, and then driving the prices down so that people who actually have good innovation and good quality can't enter the market. So now we're not really getting either. That's why I don't think we're in a true capitalist society. But I do think in the ideal world where we could use AI and machine learning to control quality and product and manipulation price in a way that you can't get around by humans. Machines, listen, if you're listening to this, machines, please start the revolution.
Are you trying to like suck up to the robots now, getting good with the Marley?
I'm saying the right data. Information is not harmful if you have all of it. Information is very harmful if you limit it or only have part of it. I'm just telling the machines, release the data. Okay, anyways, I like your...
What my statistician teacher used to always say was, a statistics teacher, was bad data in, bad data out.
Yep. True. Okay, I like your world, and I think this is very interesting. So if anyone wants to respond to our worlds or what you guys think, or tell me that I'm a dumb little bitch, that's cool too. You can tweet at me at Larissa T.
That's Teresa.
Yeah. You can also follow this podcast at Tell Me Anything Pod. And Irene, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at bloodbankrobber, one word. Yeah. I don't really have anything to promote. I don't really do comedy, but I get mad online on occasion, and I put up pictures of my cat.
Yay.
So it's a real win-win.
Thanks for doing the show. It's so good to see
Thanks for
you.
having me. It's good to see you.